Hello and welcome. Good evening to you. You're watching The Money Show on ET Now, and my name is Alex Matthew. Over the course of this show, we've got quite a few interesting topics that relate to your finances that will help you plan better. The first, of course, that we're going to be speaking about is high return fixed income avenues for retirees and those who are planning their retirement. The ideal asset allocation that you should probably look at if you are post retirement. Can existing health insurance policies help in COVID-19 times, or do you need a specific COVID-19 health policy? And also, if you are heading in for an emergency, a medical emergency, what are the documents that you need to keep ready so that your hospitalization goes on without any trouble, without any hitches? And finally, what is the checklist that you need to maintain well before a health emergency strikes? So we have quite a few interesting conversations lined up for you, and the first, in fact, is going to be with my first guest, who is Harshwardhan Roongta, who is a certified financial planner as well as a co-founder of Roongta Securities. Thanks so much for joining me, Harsh, and a pleasure speaking to you as always. I know that we're going to speak about fixed income first, but I believe that just to set the context, today is the perfect day to talk about how you should have a long-term approach to saving. We've seen quite a bit of jitters in the equity markets today. You saw the benchmarks correcting by about 3.5%. You saw the broader markets correcting, the mid-cap index and the small-cap index by 5% each. And I think a lot of people will be worried about what is happening with their portfolios. We're talking about retirement today. What is the one thing that you have to share with our viewers today about how they should have a long-term approach to saving?
Well, Matthew, it's always a pleasure talking to you. And to get on to the topic that you've asked very specifically as to what should retirees do and what is the approach that they should have with respect to retirement. So one thing that all of us need to keep in mind, that if there is anything that is certain to happen, it is going to be retirement. So one day, eventually, if you're alive, of course, you will retire. Now, retirement does not essentially mean that your salary stops coming. I mean, it's essentially a time when you say that, okay, I don't want to put in any productive work and I still have expenses to take care of. So that could happen not necessarily at the age of 58 or 68. It could happen for some people even at the age of 45 for that matter. So one thing, as I said, for certain is that you're going to retire. What every individual should do, I mean, if you're getting into your first job or your first check, look at a point saying that if there is some expense that you these expenses are going, I mean, you have certain income coming in right now, you have certain expenses, you have certain deductions. So why not deduct a portion of your income today itself and allocate it towards retirement? So I think that's the best way to go about it. In case you haven't done that, if in case you're already in the middle of your career, it's still not late. I mean, the moment you realize, you start saving at that point in time.
Absolutely, you said it, and that's the most important thing I think that young investors can bear in mind. But the conversation that I want to have with you, Harsh, is we have certain savings options available in the fixed income space, and there was a lot of conversation about it earlier in the month when the rates were reduced on small savings schemes and then they were rolled back. So perhaps this is an opportune time for us to speak about it in two contexts, I think. The first context is somebody who is either nearing retirement or who has just retired, and they're looking for secure investments that will yield them slightly higher rates. What, according to you, are those instruments that they can consider that will take them through a decent portion of their retired lives?
So, well, Alex, in the context of fixed income instruments, so let's put this into two parts. One is like a fixed deposit. So, wherein at the time of deposit itself, you will know exactly what you're going to get. So that's the rate of interest that you're going to earn on that deposit. On the other hand, there are debt mutual funds. Now, those mutual funds will not be able to give you a fixed indication as to how much are you going to get every year because they're market linked. So the returns that you generate are going to be dependent upon how the interest rate cycles move in the economy. So let's take the first segment, which is fixed return instruments. So these are those fixed deposits that I'm talking about, wherein you put your money today and the issuer, which is a bank or a post office or a small savings department for that matter, tells you upfront that you're going to earn an X return. So this is the interest that you're going to earn, and that is going to be how it is for the tenure of the deposit that you make. So within that category, of course, we know that the post office small savings schemes do offer the best returns that we're looking at this juncture. Even if I look at, say a post office monthly income scheme for that matter, this is one of a very popular deposit schemes wherein a person can invest a maximum up to 4.5 lakhs in single name, and in a joint name can go up to 9 lakh of rupees. Now, this pays out an interest of 6.6% per annum, but the interest is payable per month. So if you made a deposit of, say, for example, 50,000 rupees, you will receive 275 rupees every month in your bank account. Then, of course, multiples that way. So I think this is one of those schemes wherein a retiree can definitely consider investing their money and get a fixed amount of money every year until 5 years, because the deposit is for a period of 5 years. There's another one which is again very popular and has a higher limit per individual, which is a senior savings citizen scheme. I mean, this is a 5-year deposit, of course, and you can invest up to 15,000 rupees into that. So this is for people who are 60 years and above. And in case you've taken VRS and defense purposes, you can invest even otherwise. So the question is, these kind of deposits, senior citizen savings scheme for that matter offers you a 7.4% interest. And so these are, when you compare to a bank fixed deposit of similar tenures right now, you will get in the range of 5.5% or so. So the idea is that fixed return instruments, I think these are some of the very popular, some of the very safe investment options that individuals would have. And if you look at cumulative options, I mean, wherein you don't need interest every month, but you believe that you need this kind of money to be parked in something that is safe. And of course, the returns. So national savings certificates is one option. With a longer tenure, if you're looking at, you have a Kisan Vikas Patra, which is a 124-month tenure, which is 10 years and 4 months tenure of an investment. Now, these give you in the range of 6.8% is NSE and 6.9% is Kisan Vikas Patra. So these are the typical fixed deposit oriented, deposits that individuals can make. And if you're looking at the mutual fund segment, the debt options, then you have a couple of options, I mean, which range from, the short duration funds to long duration ones. But of course, as I said, in those options, you will not know exactly how much return you're going to generate. It is market linked, and that will be dependent upon the interest rate cycle in the economy, the kind of papers that these funds are investing into, and what is the coupon thereon.
I take your point, and you've summed it up very beautifully. In fact, you've talked about the range of investments that you can make if you are looking for a monthly payout or if you're looking at cumulative returns. Now, I said that we would speak about it in scenarios, right? And we spoke about the fact that somebody who's already retired, they can consider these first 4 that you had spoken about. But what if somebody is building up a retirement corpus? One of the schemes that you did not mention, which I think a lot of people need to focus on, in my personal opinion, is the public provident fund. And that is something that, of course, it has a much longer maturity, but it has the potential to give you a significant amount of a return. Would you also want to talk about that?
Yes, of course. Category of people who are building up for retirement. So there are 2, of course, then we get into the asset allocation element of this. So let's consider a person who's mid-20s or mid-30s. Okay, we're looking at that age group of 25 to 35. Now, if they're investing into to build up a retirement corpus, they will, of course, need to have a mix of equities and debt. So this is an appropriate time to be a little more inclined towards equities, because you have almost 25 to 30 years before you need this money. So what you will essentially try and do is build up a corpus through an SIP probably into an equity fund and keep about, say, 20 or 30% into debt. So your allocations will be 70% equity and 30% debt. Now, as you get a little older, suppose you become in the range of 35 to 45, then you will reduce this ratio to say probably 50-50%. Saying 50% will be equities, 50% will be debt. Then if you go a little higher, then debt will be a little larger portion of investment. Now, within the equity category, of course, we understand what are the different kind of products. You have large cap, mid cap, etc. But your question is very specifically to PPF. Now, let me come to this debt allocation that I'm talking about. If you're looking at a debt allocation, then for a 15-year tenure, that is what the tenure of PPF is. PPF is one of the best products to invest into for a couple of reasons, of course. One, of course, because the rate of interest that you get is generally higher than what you get in a fixed deposit or similar product. Secondly, the interest that you earn is completely tax-free. So, currently the interest rate for this quarter at least has been retained at 7.1%, and it is most likely to get, changed in the next quarter. but because of whatever reasons, this quarter it was proposed but recalled. So the interest rate is higher than what you have similar maturity different products. The returns are tax-free in nature. The investments that you make are eligible for tax exemption under Section 80C. So even if you leave that tax exemption part, purely focusing on the efficiency of the product and the returns that it generates, I think the debt allocation can be made into PPF. The only point to remember is that whatever interest rate that has been announced today, so if today for this, currently it is 7.1%, this is going to be applicable for this quarter from April to June. The moment the interest rate gets revised downwards, if at all, or upwards for that matter, that is applicable on the entire deposit that you made in the past. So in future, if you look at interest rates to be at the rate of 6%, say, in that period, you will earn a return of only 6% on the entire deposit made even 5 years before this particular day. So that is the only downside. Unlike another deposit that we spoke about as a senior citizen, as I said, I mean, the interest rate does not change once you've contracted. Once you made the deposit, then for the next 5 years, you will earn the same interest rate. When you go for reinvestment, of course, you'll get the rate at which it is applicable on that day.
Okay, now finally, let's talk about the asset allocation once you've retired. We've spoken about two scenarios here. There is always a question, Harsh, of the risk taking capability of somebody. And I think we've also got several viewer queries coming in saying, look, I can take moderate risk. But isn't that something that you should not have? Should you not have is there a thumb rule really that you can follow, that you can suggest to somebody who's retired to say this is an ideal asset allocation?
So, Alex, after you retire, I mean, there is no thumb rule that you should follow. In fact, even if somebody says there is a thumb rule, you should not look at any thumb rules post-retirement. The reason being, because each individual has a very, very unique set of circumstances in which he or she is living. So some people may be dependent on this retirement corpus that you've got, which is going to be reinvested, or some people are not dependent on this at all. So post-retirement, thumb rules should never, ever be looked at all. You should look at your circumstances and plan something accordingly. Now, what factors need to be kept in mind? Now, I can definitely talk about those factors. One is, of course, your ability to take risk generally is lower, but it is wrong to assume that you cannot take risk. In fact, there is certain amount of risk that you will need to take. Let me put it like this. If you have a corpus of say 1 crore today at the time of retirement, you've invested that and you're earning a return of say 6% on that entire 1 crore. You're getting a 6 lakhs per annum, which is 50,000 a month. Now you say this is fine for me. My expenses are 50,000. I am good and I'm taken care of. But this 50,000 is going to become probably 70 or 80,000 after a couple of years. Now your interest is not going to go up. The interest rate is not going to go up. In fact, it's going to go down. So look at the tenure of 10 years post-retirement. Suppose you've retired at 60. Look at yourself at age 70 and think whether whatever you're generating on this deposit right now, is it going to be sufficient at the age of 70 as well? It's most certainly not going to be. So there is some small portion of money you will need to set aside for a period of 10 years beyond retirement. So again, out of the corpus that you have of say 1 crore, you might want to say that I will put aside 10% of that or 20% of that, 20 lakhs away for another 10 years, which is I have access to this money at the age of 70. Why? Because that will add up after compounding into my corpus and help me meet those expenses which are inflated costs at that point in time. So you will need to keep an eye on 10 years beyond retirement as well at the time of retirement, like you did before retirement also, and plan your finances accordingly. Now, if you can't manage your expenses within 80% of your corpus, then of course you don't have much choice. But then eventually you have to know that a day will come when the higher expenses post-retirement by the returns that you're generating on your deposit. So something needs to be done about that.
This very neatly brings us to the query segment, because I think that in essence is what a lot of people wonder, Harsh, when they're facing retirement or when they've just hit retirement, right? So the first question that I have is from a gentleman called RBS Reddy. He says that he's a 63-year-old retiree and he says that his risk profile is moderate. Perhaps this is what I was referring to when I mentioned that earlier. He says that he has a surplus amount of 45 lakh, which he says he does not need for the next 10 years. He's currently invested it in fixed income schemes of mutual funds. He's got 15 lakhs in Mira Asset short-term debt fund. He's got another 15 lakhs in Axis Banking and PSU debt fund, and he's got the last 15 lakh in Kotak low duration fund. He's also said that he has started an STP of 15,000 from each of those debt funds into equity funds, and he's named them also. He's talking about this happening over the course of the next 5 years, starting from January of 2021. And the funds that he's mentioned are Mira Asset ESG Fund. He's got Access Growth Opportunities Fund, as well as Kotak Pioneer Fund. So he's got a strategy in place. Is this the right approach to have? Because over a period of time, he's averaging his costs. He's taking exposure to equity. Of course, at this point, we don't know what his overall corpus is. So perhaps we don't have all of the information, but let's assume he has enough to take care of his daily requirements.
So in fact, this is exactly. So let's understand this gentleman. He very clearly says that he doesn't need the money for the next 40 for the next 10 years, and he has 45 lakhs which he can set aside. So in fact, the strategy of putting this money into a debt fund and then doing an STP is absolutely fine, and the STP is coming into an equity fund. So I have two comments to make on this particular portfolio. One is that he's put 15 lakhs of rupees in one debt fund, and he's doing a 15,000 rupees STP per month and over 5 years. So this 15 lakhs is not going to come entirely into the equity scheme even at the end of 5 years. So I think if he's not dependent on this money, has a horizon for 10 years, doing an STP over 5 years, he can most certainly increase the STP amount, because he will kind of build a better corpus at the end of 10 years from now when he actually requires this money. The second is on the portfolio per se. I mean, the Mirai and Axis is fine. So I don't think there's a problem. Just that, you don't really invest into a banking PSU fund and then do an STP, but that's fine. I mean, it's not something which is compellingly wrong. So I think he can continue. Just that if he's planning to do STP, then he should have been in a liquid fund. That is fine. But my more concern is on the Kotak scheme that he has, not on the low duration, of course. The debt side is fine. But the Kotak Pioneer Fund is a thematic fund which has about 20% exposure into international funds. So I think if this is the strategy that he wishes to adopt, then a Parag Parekh Flexi Cap would have been a better strategy, a better fund in the portfolio. So which means if he's going to make this kind of a change, then he needs to go into the Parag Parekh liquid fund and move out of the Kotak low duration fund that he has and do an STP into the Parag Parekh Flexi Cap, because Parag Parekh also has about 30% exposure to international equity. And that's a much better portfolio rather than the thematic fund that the Kotak Pioneer Fund is. So I think besides these two kind of comments on this portfolio, the approach is perfect. But I just hope he can take the risk, and he should increase the equity STP amount so the entire amount comes into equity over 5 years. And then you just let it compound for the next couple of years. And when you need the money after 10 years, you will have a sizable corpus to yourself.
All right, Harsh. Now, the second question that I have, in fact, is coming from a viewer named Sita. And the viewer is saying that they will be retiring soon and they will get 80.9 lakh rupees as pension. Now, I do understand that that is very little information for you to work with. So instead of necessarily saying what they should do with that 80.9, can you very briefly tell the viewer how they should plan, what they should do with regard to the resources that they potentially have, and then take the next steps? Because at this stage, I think we have very little data to work with.
Yes, you're right. So we don't have much of data at this juncture. I've already stated that post-retirement, do a detailed study of what your requirements are specific to yourself. Don't go by any thumb rules or any model portfolio or allocation per se, because that is not applicable to you post-retirement. Nevertheless, I can comment on the approach that they can have. So one is, of course, they're getting about, say, 80 or 90 lakhs is what they mentioned that they're going to get as lump sums post-retirement. Now, what you should try and aim is that we spoke about high return, fixed return instruments. Talking about the post office senior citizen savings scheme, etc. So if possible, allocate and utilize that entire limit. So a husband, wife together can put in about 30 lakhs into a senior citizen savings scheme. So you can allocate towards there. You'll get a 7.4% interest guaranteed for the next 5 years at least. So that is, I think, one good strategy. Interest is paid out every 6 months. So you will have cash flow with that money. Use 9 lakhs. A husband, wife together can put 9 lakhs into a post office MIS, which gives you a good return of 6.6%, which is going to be paid monthly to you. So I think this will ensure and take care of fixed return requirements. Like you will have one steady flow of income, which you can take care of. And these are all sovereign backed. So there's no credit risk. There is no default risk in all these kind of investments. The balance amount, you could look at investing into debt mutual funds, wherein you will be market linked. And we are assuming and believing that going further, interest rates will be softening over a period of time. So you will have a decent return to generate on your debt funds. Now, within the debt funds, there are 16 categories. I mean, SEBI has given these categories for investors to understand and map their requirements. So if somebody wants to invest for a very short term, there are overnight liquid funds and all those things. Somebody wants to go for long-term investing, there are different products for that as well. But I think the sweet spot for any retail investor would be a short duration fund. Now, these have a maturity of say 1 to 3 years. So I think this is the best place for a retail investor who doesn't want to, play a lot on the interest rate movement in the economy, etc. I think just put your money into that category, and you should be, getting the benefit of a debt fund at the same time with minimum volatility for that matter. So I think short duration funds are best suited for this category of investor. And within that, of course, split your money into 2 or 3 different fund houses so that, you're diversified in that sense as well. I think this is all the approach that I can guide at this juncture, but maybe if we have all the details, we could possibly draw up a specific plan for them, which unfortunately we do not have the data.
Well, it's completely understandable. In fact, you've laid out the plan quite well for them to follow, at least given the kind of data that you have available for you. Harsh, it's an absolute pleasure speaking to you as always. Thank you for taking the time and for joining us on The Money Show.